Hey everyone, Mark Meckler here, president of Convention of States and your host for the BattleCry, but you already knew that because you're here on the BattleCry. Got to show off something. This is my new hat. I want you to be able to see it. 2A shall not be infringed. I love this design. Convention of States on the side. I would tell you to go order it in the store, but not available yet. This is a sneak preview. One of the privileges of leadership. I get to get the stuff first. But you will see it probably in the next couple of weeks in the store. Again, that's our 2A hat, and we're going to be developing a whole line of 2A clothes and gear and stuff, I hope. I love this design, so check it out at the store. Go to the store. That is shopconventionofstates.com. Lots of cool stuff there. Lots of new t-shirts and cups and mugs and all kinds of stuff, but that hat's not quite there yet. All right, let's do our call to action. You guys know every week, one of the things that I do with you guys is I ask you to do something. It's not enough to just listen or just watch. Really appreciate that you guys do that. But the question is, what can you do? And this week, there really is something you can do. I think it's pretty easy, but I don't think enough people do it. And that is you can go out and express your support openly for DOGE, for Tesla, because people are attacking Tesla and Elon Musk. And look, I'm not an electric car guy, but God bless Elon Musk for creating this iconic American company. God bless him for being willing to take the time it takes to run DOGE and everything else he's doing, taking all the death threats and attacks on Tesla. So support DOGE, support Tesla, support Musk. And ultimately, and Musk says this every time he's interviewed, President Donald Trump and his administration, because DOGE is not possible. None of this great stuff that's happening is possible without Trump and the administration. So how do you support them? Well, go online after you finish watching this and post on Twitter, post on Facebook, post on Instagram, wherever you do that, or talk to your friends about it. Say, isn't it awesome what DOGE is doing? Isn't it awesome what Musk is doing or the administration? Isn't it incredible what Linda McMahon's doing, closing down, at least gutting in half right now, the Department of Education on its way to being closed down, or what Lee Zeldin is doing at the EPA, or what they're doing at Department of the Interior and getting rid of all these useless employees that they didn't need, cutting the budgets. It's incredible what they're doing, but if you don't express support for it, the left is out there attacking it, and it will lose its popularity, and ultimately they will lose the ability to proceed. And so what we need is we need you out there openly supporting it. So I want you to send us in links of you supporting all that stuff. I would appreciate that. You can send that to Producer G. You can even put that in the conventionofstates.com/ask Mark channel. You can go there, just put that link in, and you can put in questions, but you could also put in your comments and show us your posts that you posted in support of DOGE, Tesla, Musk, and the Trump administration generally. They need your support. That's the thing that you can do, is show that support. If you want to know why you should support this stuff, there's an interview. If you haven't watched it, you should watch it. And Producer G will throw the link in the channel. The interview in full is on X, and it was conducted by Brett Baer, and he was interviewing Elon Musk. And I've seen Musk interviewed before, but it was not just Elon Musk. It was all the primary players in the DOGE team. I would call them the DOGE men. And it was unbelievable. It's about a half hour long without commercials. And you get to go through a bunch of the different departments and what they're finding in these departments, why they're doing what they're doing. These guys are all patriots, taking time away from their families, their country, dealing with death threats, dealing with the abuse of the left in America, the abuse of the left in Washington, D.C. And you'll be stunned by what you see. I promise you. I would say my number one reaction in watching that interview was just, wow. I mean, wow, these guys are really smart. Wow, these guys are doing great work. Wow, these guys are patriots. And wow, at the level of waste, fraud, and abuse. And they each give examples of the kinds of stuff that they're finding. They're really good about talking about. They're not just here to dismantle government. They're here to serve the American taxpayer, to serve the American people, to make sure that people aren't defrauded out of their Social Security checks, to make sure that the computer systems come out of the 1960s and come into 2025 and beyond, that the computer systems are all cooperating with each other. They found, by the way, in one department, I believe this was in Health and Human Services, that there were 27 chief information officers, and that there were way more than that as far as different computer systems that don't talk to each other. So they are going to be fixing all that stuff, and I'm super excited about that. And by the way, I'm looking behind me because I have dogs over here, and they're doing their usual doggy terrorist stuff. Maybe they'll come over and visit at some point. But, Doc is now 5.5 months old. He's 90 pounds and he's causing a lot of trouble. We'll see if, I'm not sure I could lift him anymore, but we'll see if maybe we can get him up into the lap later on. Anyway, watch this interview. Brett Baer, the DOGE men, Elon Musk. I think you're going to be really impressed, and it'll give you reason and ways to go out and support and defend DOGE. I think you're going to love it. I think you're going to see the inside. This is as transparent as I've ever seen government be in my lifetime. So I really love it. And this idea of DOGE, it goes way back. Like, it's not just something new with President Trump and Elon Musk. The idea of cutting waste, fraud, and abuse in our government goes way back. And if you want to know who some of the original DOGesters were, it's not that hard. You can put in cut waste, fraud, and abuse and Democrat, and what you'll find is people who railed against government waste, fraud, and abuse, people who are traditionally thought of as of the left. President Clinton, Al Gore, Vice President Gore, President Obama, Vice President Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Bernie Sanders. They were all railing against government waste, fraud, and abuse. They were all for getting rid of, rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. So why not now? Like, what's going on that's so different? Why have they pretended for so long that they wanted to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse? But when it's actually happening, when the contracts are being canceled, when the actual waste, fraud, and abuse are being exposed, they're crying bloody murder. Why is that? Well, I think we now see why it is. Because literally hundreds of billions of dollars of your taxpayer dollars were going out to support radical leftist causes. And though we don't have definitive proof of this yet, I think what you're going to find is a lot of these groups were engaged in election activity on the government dollar working against Republicans. I think this upcoming election is going to be really interesting because the gravy train has stopped. It's been pushed off the rails. It's sitting off the side of the tracks on its side in a smoking heap of rubble. And all this money, including $2 billion to Stacey Abrams' brand new nonprofit group that supposedly was going to buy refrigerators for consumers, energy efficient refrigerators. This slush fund is now gone. That's why the left is reacting so violently. They know that this is one of the ways they've kept political power is by siphoning hundreds of billions of dollars out of the federal government, creating a gravy train for leftists, and creating the ability to engage in electoral activities on the left and on behalf of the left. So, of course, they're crying and screaming because they can't allow that to happen. They may not be able to ever win another election without that stuff, and we can pray. And, in a bizarre twist, you may have seen NPR's CEO on the air this week because she was being interviewed by Congress. But I want to back up a little bit because a while ago, I think it was back in 2024, NPR was doing a story on testosterone levels in men. And so they tested their staff at NPR. This is in the bizarre but true category. And they did testosterone level testing throughout the men in their staff. And they found that the highest level of testosterone in the building was so low that you should see a doctor about it. So doctors generally like to see men in the range of 300 to 1,000, depending on age and other factors. And the highest level at NPR was 270. That explains a lot, doesn't it? That network is so feminized and so neutered and so dishonest and so leftist. And I don't know about you, but when I go out and I look at leftist men, I mean, I hate to say this, but it's mostly girly men, right? And if you look at generally masculine guys tend to be more conservative. Every study shows this out, by the way. The more you go to the gym, the more you lift weights, the more masculine you are, the more likely you are to be a conservative. That's just the way it is. They call it toxic masculinity. I just call it being a dude, being an actual man, right? Not being feminized. We saw this week NPR CEO go before Congress and have to testify. And I was blown away because almost everything she said was a lie. Is she hallucinating? Is she lying? Is she on drugs? Does she have dementia? I'm not trying to be funny. I mean, this is really what happened. She was asked about a book that she tweeted about that she said she took the entire day off to read. And this was a book about reparations. And she said that she didn't believe she'd ever read that book. And they read her tweet about the book and she said she didn't recall that. And there was so much stuff like this. Turns out that on the editorial board, there are 87 members of the editorial board of NPR. And she was asked about this, and she was asked if she knew that all 87 were Democrats. And she said, well, she didn't know about that, but that would concern her. She didn't know. She didn't know about that. Do you believe that? Do you believe she didn't know about that? I mean, and I would just say, look, if she doesn't know that of her entire editorial board, 100% lean left, if she doesn't know about that, and she said, by the way, that she would be concerned to find that out. But if she didn't know about that, she is either incompetent or has dementia or some kind of severe mental impairment, that she's the CEO of NPR and didn't know that. Like, look, you could ask me about my organization, and my staff is roughly the size of their editorial board. And if you said, well, what's the political orientation of your staff? Now, we don't ask that, by the way. We don't say, are you Republican or Democrat? But if you ask me, do I know? I would say, yeah, probably 100% Republican. I mean, maybe some independents or libertarians thrown in there, but I would be stunned if there were any Democrat. I mean, I just know that, right? You would know that about your staff too. And the fact that she didn't know that about her editorial board either points to complete incompetence, gross stupidity, or dementia. I don't know which it is. Now, I thought that the Democrats the Republicans did a pretty good job of taking her apart in her testimony, of challenging her. But I think that the Republicans, generally speaking, are not very good at this. And here's what I mean by that. It really seems like what they want more than anything is their 10 or 20 or 30-second soundbite. And they don't put together a good, all the way through sort of cohesive storyline of interrogation. For example, when she said, when the CEO of NPR said she was unaware that it was 87, I would have dug in there and I would have said, do you not know your staff? Do you not pay attention to your staff? Are you worried that perhaps you're suffering from dementia? I would have literally asked those questions. Do you think that we should find you competent when you have no idea whether there's a bias among your editorial staff, when it turns out that they are all dyed-in-the-wool Democrats? So you can dig in on these questions. The Republicans are very bad at that because they all want their 10 seconds of fame. They all want their soundbite instead of coordinating testimony. If you saw the Republican committee that investigated the J6 committee, what you saw was they all yielded their time to a couple of people. So instead of wanting their sound bites, they actually wanted to do real investigation. That's the way it should be done, not the way this one was done. I mean, I love to see them grilling her, but it wasn't done in a very effective way. All right, switching subjects, RFK Jr., in my opinion, seems to be living up to the hype. Who knew that he was going to live up to the hype? I mean, I was hopeful. He's at HHS right now. He's just announced Operation Stork Speed, which is to make sure that we have a safe supply of baby formula in the United States of America that is not filled with heavy metals and other toxic stuff. And I just have to say, I'm completely blown away that there are actually companies that make baby formula that have heavy metals in them and other toxic things. What kind of evil person would do that? But they're going to make sure that this stuff is cleaned up. I think that's really great. Unbelievable we have to do it, but apparently we have to. And I heard a report that he's going to be laying off 20,000 employees and not affecting the services that the American people get. I believe that. That's fantastic. He's also starting real, actual vaccine studies. Like, we're going to get some actual, real, skeptical science on vaccines. And I like that, instead of the fake BS that we get from Big Pharma so that they can make a whole bunch of money. Now, I want to be really clear. I'm not Mr. Anti-Big Pharma. I think Big Pharma does a lot of bad, evil stuff. And I think they should be held accountable for that. But I also think a lot of people live a lot longer, a lot healthier lives today than we did 100 years ago because sometimes because of big pharma, not in spite of them, despite what everybody wants you to think. And I think this is an important point overall. Everything has nuance to it. This is a really important thing that we all remember, especially as grassroots activists. We tend to get really riled up. I think that's a normal human thing. You hear a story, it seems really bad. The headline is really terrible. And so we get all riled up and we don't look at the facts and we don't dig in because you can't dig in on everything, but we get all riled up anyway. And then maybe the story is not as clear cut as it seems. And I think this is true with Big Pharma. Big Pharma does some really bad stuff, in my opinion. I don't think we should have Big Pharma advertising on TV. I think what they did with the COVID shots is terrible and they should be punished for it and held liable for it. But not everything that Big Pharma does is bad. Not every person inside Big Pharma is bad. So we got to remember that. Always look at things with nuance, get the information, and then make your judgment. All right, Marco Rubio, again, living up to the hype. I don't know if there was hype, but Marco Rubio is doing a fantastic job, in my opinion, actually way better than I thought he would do as Secretary of State. And this week he said we've revoked the visas or green cards of 300 or just over 300 student Hamasnik protesters. And he defended that position incredibly well, in my opinion. What he said was basically, if when you got your visa or if when you got your green card, that you filled out paperwork saying that you were going to be engaged in protests against the United States of America, in protests in favor of terrorists, in protests that were threatening Jews on campuses, or that you were going to take over libraries, that you were going to damage property, that we wouldn't have given you that visa or we wouldn't have given you that green card. And so we reserve the right to revoke those things, and we're going to revoke them, as he said, from every crazy person that I come across that has one of these visas. We're going to revoke those visas or those green cards or those work permits or whatever they are, and God bless them. I say, good start. Now let's really get to work. A lot more of these need to happen. They shouldn't come into the country in the first place. They should be much more well vetted. And if we find out they're here and they're doing this kind of stuff, they got to go. I love that. Good job, Marco Rubio. All right, last week in COS, I was in the Texas legislature for a couple of days. Always love being with my Texas team. I'm a Texas native, in case you didn't know that. So I'm happy to be there, happy to work with the team. It's another great team. We've got a lot of them around the country. Love being with my Texas team. We were there for a House hearing on Convention of States. And I got to say, sometimes being in those legislatures, it feels like penance for all the bad things I've done in my life, because it's torture. They're slow, they're tedious, they're often redundant. And in a lot of cases, I think these hearings are just fake. And here's what I mean by that. I was in the Texas legislature. I sat there from about noon. I think we got out about 6:15. We were the last to be heard. I think we started at about, I don't know, I want to say 5:30, 5:45. So it wasn't a long hearing. We chose not to have all our people testify because we believe we have the votes in that committee, and we wanted to respect the limited time of those committee members. They'd been on and off in that committee since 8 a.m. in the morning. They didn't need to hear from a whole bunch of us. They've been hearing from us for years. They know everybody's position, pro and con against. Here's what I really hate about the committee hearings. I think there were 15 on that committee. That's the number I want to say. By the time we came up, there were 5 people sitting on that committee. Literally, just 5 people. And I asked somebody, well, is that a quorum? Doesn't seem like that's a quorum. And they said, well, the quorum is met when the committee starts, and then everybody can leave, and there's still a quorum as long as the chairman's there, which I think is really weird. So I got up and testified. Somebody from Texas Public Policy got up and testified. A bunch of crazy opponents testified. And by crazy, I mean crazy. Testified against us, said nothing rational, just a bunch of stupid garbage, including Klaus Schwab is going to run the convention. Yeah, I heard that we're supported by George Soros, and then Common Cause, actually supported by George Soros, got up and spoke and said that they're against this. So I don't understand any of that. Meanwhile, there are only 5 or 6 people who were there to listen to this. So 2/3 of the committee were gone. So what's the point of even having a committee hearing? And what that shows me is that's just fake. And I really hate that sometimes about the legislatures. This is not true just of Texas. This happens all over the country, but I think it's particularly bad in the Texas legislature. A lot of those people, they're not just leaving because they want to go have a water break or whatever. They leave because they need to go testify on their own bills in other committees. They have other meetings that end up conflicting. I don't know. It just seems like then don't have committee hearings. Have us come visit you at your offices, have us submit written testimony or video testimony, but why sit there all day if you're not even going to be in committee? Well, I think we look good in that committee. I think we're going to pass out of committee. We then move over to the calendars committee. And I think we'll be on the floor in the next couple of weeks. And hopefully we'll pass the removal of the sunset through the House. I think the Senate looks good, and we will get it done here in Texas. So New Hampshire House was heard this week. We made it out of committee and made it to the floor, but we ended up getting tabled, whatever that means. It means they could bring it back up. I doubt that's going to happen. It was really interesting because we were part of 12 maybe in a row that got tabled. No debate, no nothing. I got to be honest with you, like, it happened so fast. I'm not exactly sure what happened. We're still digging in to figure out how that happens or what that actually means. But all right, on to the Q&A, my favorite part. Before we get there, remember, Convention of States at Home with Tim Barton. That's next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Go to Convention of States at Home or conventionofstates.com/at-home to register for that. You're not going to want to miss Tim Barton. That guy is one of the best speakers I've ever met, knows more about American history than almost anybody I've ever met, except for maybe his dad, who might know a little bit more. All right. Also, remember to sign the open letter to Trump at conventionofstates.com/Trump. Sign the open letter to Musk at conventionofstates.com/Musk. Hit the like button, subscribe, tell your friends about what we're doing so we can spread the word. Don't forget the new t-shirts at shopconventionofstates.com. We have the new IRS t-shirts there, the Income Robbery Service, new American Patriot t-shirt, and Spilling the Tea since 1773. Great stuff. Go to shopconventionofstates.com. All right, now on to Ask Mark Anything. Now, I hope that these are as good as the questions that producer G asked me last week, but that's a high bar, so I doubt it. Let's see. First is Sheila Umbenhauer. If Republicans control the Senate, why can't they get the votes needed to get rid of biased judges? And I think what you're referring to, Sheila, is impeachment. And the way impeachment works is the House impeaches, which is kind of like an indictment, right? They say that there's been a crime committed, and in this case, high crimes and misdemeanors, I guess. And then they go over to the Senate for the trial, and the trial requires a 2/3 majority to convict. We don't have a 2/3 majority that would convict any judge right now, especially the leftist judges. So there can't really be a successful conviction on an impeachment. Now, that doesn't mean they shouldn't impeach some of these judges. I think they could. That gives them broad investigatory powers. We got to look at their emails, we got to figure out their biases and present those to the American public. I think we ought to do that with a few judges and process as punishment. The left has used this kind of stuff against us. So I think we ought to do it, and we ought to expose some of these judges for who they are. Rick Jensen asks, what size is your wrestling Speedo? Excuse me? What? Producer G, where did that come from? First of all, I don't wrestle, and I don't have a Speedo. And I just got to say, no man should ever wear a Speedo, period. Ever, under any circumstances, don't do it. If someone asks you to do it, if you go on a European cruise and you see all the European dudes doing it, there's just no excuse for a real man wearing a Speedo. And now that some of you might have an image of me wearing a wrestling Speedo, we got to close because that's a bad image, and we got to be out of here for the week. So God bless you guys. I appreciate you. Keep working hard, and we will see you next week on the BattleCry. And I'm just going to try and erase that.